Okay, let's do this.
Let's do it.
Action. Oh, I'm kidding. Guys, how are you? So today we have here our new guest, special friend of mine and my teacher from New Image, and he's also a director and actor. He's done a lot of plays. I was looking into his resume as well. I'm like, oh my god, you've done Scooby-doo?
Yeah.
Scooby-doo too, and you also have Stargate, you have Life Sentence. I was on set once for Life Sentence, but I always dreamed to work with Lucy Hale. And you were there.
Oh, really?
Yes. Change, continue, like you've done everything in Vancouver. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you introduce yourself. Who better than you to talk about your credit? But seriously, guys, it has a lot. So let's Zahf Paroo, my friend, and let's talk a little bit about acting today.
Hey guys, I'm coming to you live from my bedroom in Vancouver. I would be in the living room, but we have a 2.5-year-old and he runs the house, and so he's running around like crazy. So this is the only sort of private place in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working as an actor professionally since 1995. That was my very first paid gig when I graduated from theater school. I was only 19. And I got a job at sort of the local theater in Calgary, where I had gone to school. One of the artistic directors had come to see one of the shows at the school, and they had an internship program where they bring sort of young actors in, and they have sort of equity apprentices. So the union apprentices, and you do an apprenticeship and you learn, but you get paid. And so I did that show.
If you could, sorry to interrupt, explain a little bit what apprentice means, because maybe some new people in the industry, they don't really know what the term means.
Sure, yeah. So equity is the Theatre Actors Union, and ACTRA is the Canadian Film Actors Union. So in America, it's SAG. So I'm a member of all three. But in the equity, in all of the unions, when you start out and you're you have to have a certain number of credits to qualify to become a full member. So in the meantime, when you're starting to build your credits, let's say you need 6 credits. So if you have 1, 2, or 3 credits, you can join a professional show under what's called an apprenticeship, which means you're building towards your way of becoming a professional actor.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and then I did a summer of Shakespeare out in Calgary before I moved to Vancouver. And it's
always Shakespeare. The beginning.
Yeah, we did a summer of Shakespeare, which was awesome. We did Romeo and Juliet and Julius Caesar that year. And I played Romeo that year, which was sort of my first. Yeah, it was my first big sort of lead in any of the shows that we had done. And sort of in school, I'd played sort of supporting roles going through school, and that's a hard lesson to learn. To sort of, you want to be the lead in everything when you're young, and then you sort of, and then eventually when you do, it's like, yay, I climbed that mountain.
Mind blowing. Oh my God, I'm the lead now. I'm leading.
Yeah. Not so much anymore. I love doing the supporting roles now. They're much more.
Yes.
So then after that, I moved to Vancouver, and I got an agent, and I started to do sort of commercial auditions and small sort of one-line roles on stuff. And I started to sort of build it up, and I got to know the casting directors, and I got some experience being on set. And I worked through a lot of stuff and started to build up to bigger roles and bigger roles and bigger roles. And as that started to continue, I still wanted to do theater. So I try and find a way to do sort of one theater show every year, but that becomes tricky when you're doing film, because you have to lock yourself into an amount of time, whether that's, 6 weeks or 3 months. And then you have to give up any film work that comes along the way, because you can't leave in the middle of a theater contract to go do a movie. So your agent is always sort of saying like, no, don't take the theater gig. There might be a film gig coming, but if you do that, you can sort of go years without working sometimes, where you're trying to, grasp for a really great film role, and things might not go your way.
You have to be guessing all the time. What do you think your future gonna look like that year? And you go for that.
Yeah, and like if you know, and there's something cool about knowing that you have a theater gig on the way, to sort of ramp up to that. And like I've always said, theater is sort of food for the actor's soul. Film, because an actor's medium, you get to stand in front of that crowd of people and sort of tell that story from beginning to end. And then, you know, you take them on a journey. But film is really an editor's medium. As an actor, you do your role and then you leave it in the hands of somebody else to see if it gets executed or not. And sometimes
you don't choose your best scene, right? You just get to watch it.
You might have the best performance of your life and there's a boom mic, you know, in the shot and they can't use it. So you never know with those things how they're going to end up. So it's nice for actors. I think if you have the opportunity to do theater, it really feeds the soul. It's good for you.
You talk to the audience at the same time. I was gonna ask you if you think the biggest difference between theater and like TV, films, etc., is the times you have to film. Like you can do from 2-3 times if you do perfectly, or it depends on the takes they want to get from you. Or and on theater is live, so you got that one moment to get people. How can we say, like, to get people involved in the story? But at film, you do as many times as the director wants. The lighting's working properly, technical issues, etc.
I think the other thing too is that, you know, the tricky part with film is that you're not, like when you're telling a story in the realm of theater, you start at the beginning of the story and you end at the end of the story, right? That's how you tell the story. But in film, you don't do it that way. You shoot according to location availability and actor availability. So your first day on set might be the last scene of the movie. So you, the actor, don't have the opportunity to go through that emotional journey and end up where you're going to be at. You just have to know. And so sometimes you'll see that specifically in action movies where like somebody will get like, you know, shot in the arm, and then in the next scene they punch somebody with that arm. And that's because they shot the punch scene before they shot the scene where they got shot. So they didn't clock that, like, oh, my arm is going to be injured. So sort of injuries come and go in those action movies because you're shooting in
all over the place. So what would you recommend to actors, new actors especially, because they tend to get lost sometimes, to not be scared or frightened because you're going to start from the end and then you're going to get into the emotions from the beginning again and make that journey and make it look natural, the most natural as possible?
Well, I think my advice to sort of all actors, if you have the opportunity to, is to start in theater first, because you'll really, I think, find a love for the craft of acting if you do it that way. And it's good. It's good for us as the performer. When you're doing film, it's really a different technique, you know. Stage acting and film acting are the same, but they're different. You know what I mean? It's if you go to the gym and you do a day of weights and you do a day of cardio, you're still working out, but they're quite different in their techniques and sort of what they do for you. So I always say it's sort of like, you know, weights and cardio or food and drink. Like they exist together, and they're the same thing, but they're different. So when you're doing film, it's really important to understand the camera and the techniques of the camera and what it means for you to be able to adjust your performance to the camera versus being on stage. You have to adjust to the audience.
Yes. And I could, if I may, add that you're going to do your journey on the day, right? For the day the script is scripted for. So you're going to act for this episode. So there is that journey of beginning, middle, and end for the day, that episode. So it's different from the whole picture, right?
Yeah. And so, you know, those days are broken up into sort of what they technically need to get. So you, the actor, are in charge when you're doing film and TV of your emotional journey, because they have to worry about things like continuity and lighting and, you know, sort of editing and making sure that they get all the pieces of the puzzle they need to stick it together. They're going to assume, hiring you as a professional actor, that you're able to deal with the component of your emotional journey. They just don't have time for it. Most directors, there's two types of directors in film and TV. There's one that comes from an acting background and one that comes from a technical background. So if you have a director that's come from an acting background, they'll oftentimes take time with you before you start filming to check in and be like, where are you emotionally in this? But most directors, a lot of directors come from a technical background, so they don't even understand actor talk. They understand camera and lighting and angles and
maybe in the background looking at the camera to see how it's
yeah, totally.
Nice. So can you tell us a little bit about Scooby-Doo? How was the experience? You were like the villain?
Yeah, I did Scooby-Doo 2 then in, I think, 2003, I think I shot it.
Yeah, it's been a long time ago, but it's
long time ago. Yeah, it was really cool. They actually they were looking for a heavy set white guy with a big orange beard when they were casting that role.
Really?
So sometimes what happens to me, early on in my career at that point, there wasn't a lot of stuff written for people that look like me. So the casting directors in the city, being awesome as they are, they would often bring in sort of 10 versions of so 10 guys with overweight guys with red beards, and then one sort of what they called a wild card. They bring in one different thing just for the directors to look at. And when I came in to do Scooby-Doo 2, I was the one different guy that they had that day. And they liked what I brought to the role. They thought it was really funny, and then we shot it, and it was a really fun gig. I'd always been a big fan of Alicia Silverstone before that, so it was kind of cool to actually work with her.
You didn't know she was a guy?
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know she was vegan either. She tried to. She was very. She gave me a lot of literature on even back then about sort of food processing and Monsanto and sort of. She's a very sort of strict vegan and.
So that's when you began.
What's that?
That's when you began to be vegan too?
No, I didn't become vegan, but I did start to sort of understand sustainability in food, which I never occurred to me at that point before that. Yeah.
Amazing.
So that was fun. I made some, it was a fun experience, and I made some pretty cool friends on the sets. But the weird thing about sort of being a Vancouver actor is it's a lot like, the circus coming to town. So they bring in these things and they build it all, and it's really fun, and then the next day it's all just gone, and there's sort of empty popcorn boxes on the ground, and you never get to harvest those friendships or relationships that you make working with people in this city. So a lot of the directors, like LA directors that have come through, although if you had been in LA, they have upcoming projects that they would think of you for. It doesn't really work that way as a Canadian actor. So you don't really get to build off those relationships like you do if you're in the States. But the States is a crazy place right now. So
what about the other shows that are most regular in Vancouver, like Continuum, Life Sentence? I don't know if it's still going on, but
Life Sentence just had one season. I think Life Sentence just had one season. I think Supernatural shot here for I think 11 seasons.
I wasn't.
I didn't do an episode of Supernatural, oddly enough. I don't really do those CW shows. I'm sort of more of a character actor. So they, they, I don't fit the aesthetic of what they. I mean, I've done a couple of them, but they have a different sort of what they're looking for, and that's cool.
What about that movie you've done? It's totally different.
That was a funny story. That was a really good lesson for me. I did this movie called The Seventh Son, and I was so excited when I got cast in it. It was Jeff Bridges and Julianne Moore, and Julianne Moore played this witch, and she had these 4 sort of servant witches that were like merchants of death, and I was the king of swords. And so there's all this really cool stuff, and we went in, and I was, I've had sword training before, so I went in and. Oh,
did you?
Yeah. And so I went in, and I was already quite proficient with the sword, so they felt really comfortable. They were like, "Great, this is awesome." Nice. So I was working with the fight teams from like Game of Thrones and Braveheart, and so doing all this really cool stuff. And I worked on the movie for like a month, and just like my whole body was painted blue, and my character had like 4 arms. And so a lot of the fight sequences we had to be like, these are your real arms, but then you're going to have the CGI arms that they add in afterwards.
So the
And I worked on the
CGI
movie.
on the green room. So you filmed the scenes on the green room.
No, we filmed it all in sort of practical locations, and then they would add in that stuff afterwards. So when I was fighting with my swords, I literally had to keep my hands up here with these,
For
doing
the
it
other
because they
arms.
were going to add the other ones in later.
Oh.
So that was tiring. But yeah, I worked on the movie for a month, and I would come home with big, doing all these sword sequences, big chunks taken out of my legs, just exhausting. And then when they edited the movie, I was only in about 90 seconds of the movie. So, I had we rented out a whole theater, and I had 60 of my friends that had gone to see it. And then I was barely in the movie, and the movie wasn't very good. So that was a lesson. Yeah. So then you sort of have a lesson where you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that again until I've at least seen the movie first to make sure that it's worth bringing 60 of my friends to.
Yeah, it's good. I watched the whole thing and I'm like, where's that? And then I saw you.
And I worked on the movie for a month, so there was so much stuff that we did. They just ended up they tried to make it, it was pretty cool script to start out, and we were in it a lot. And then they decided to focus on the love story and try sell it as sort of Twilight-y, and it didn't really work. So then none of us witches were really in the movie, and that was a real bummer because we did some really cool stuff.
Were you on Twilight?
No.
I wish I was. I wasn't even
No.
What about The Good Doctor? How is The Good Doctor?
The Good Doctor was cool, man. I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one. A lot of my scenes I play one of the anesthesiologists or anesthetists on the show. So all of my scenes, I'm wearing a mask, so you can't really see that it's me, and I'm just sort of we're doing surgeries and stuff. So while it's really cool to sort of be on a medical show that tries to be as accurate as possible,
I wonder about that. How does it work in the scene? I've never been on a medical scene. I don't know.
Yeah, they'll have a few, they always have real doctors on hand talking about procedural things, or if somebody's has to be doing stitches or something, they'll show the actors the proper technique of how to do that so that it looks authentic. So they always have at least 2 doctors on set. Yeah, for that show anyway. I mean, I've done a couple of sort of doctor shows, and that one always makes sure that they have sort of keeps the authenticity intact as much as possible.
Yeah, perhaps Grey's Anatomy goes on the same tone. They have doctors.
I think they do. I think those sort of doctor shows that stick around for a long time really sort of take the effort to make sure that side of things is right, because you don't want to alienate your audiences by making sort of simple mistakes that can be, you don't want doctors to watch it and be like, that's not how you do that.
That's not me. You're lying to the audience.
And I'm sure that stuff happens. We're making television after all. You take creative license on things. So, there's a lot of things that I'm sure well, that would never happen, but they try and keep it as authentic as possible.
So how do they film the surgery part?
It's pretty cool. They'll usually, they'll either have sort of a prosthetic setup where somebody is there, and if the person's in, they sort of slip the top part of their body into it, and they're sort of laying like this, and then the prosthetic is here with their insides open, or they'll shoot it in pieces, partially with just a focus on the prosthetic, and then swap it out and have the real actor laying there, and do sort of the stuff where you see their face.
Oh, nice. See, I'm learning here because I didn't know. I've never done one of those. So interesting.
Yeah. It's pretty cool to see sort of, when they have somebody opened up and they're you see their internal organs, because again, the props team is trying to make that look as authentic as possible. So there's, you're getting sort of a bird's eye view into what it looks like inside an actual human being. You're like, wow, that looks as squishy as I thought it would.
Have you seen anybody get dizzy from the fake blood?
No, it's all pretty, the props guys are very, those things, one prosthetic costs thousands of dollars. So they're very, yeah, of course. They're so,
very realistic.
It takes time and money to make those things. So they keep the minimal amount of people around it. They don't let anybody touch it unless it's part of the scene. and they'll go through and sort of explain what each piece of it is and what it's made out of and sort of what you can do and can't do. So once you know it's rubber tubing, it sort of takes the like, yeah, you're not really freaked out. I mean, I don't really get freaked out by blood, but I mean, I suspect if that was a real human being, that would be a different reaction. But just knowing that it's foam and latex, I'm fine.
Oh my god, yeah. I've never thought that way, but true. You know, it's fake, so
yeah.
I think it looks very real, but you still know unconscious, like it's fake. So don't panic.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Once Upon a Time? I love Once Upon a Time. I just want to know about your day on Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was cool. I grew up as a Disney kid, so, you know, to be sort of tied into that Aladdin lore was, I played Prince Ahmed. So,
you have this lore.
In the cartoon, he's the suitor that comes to see Jasmine, and Raja bites his butt, and he's got the heart boxers on underneath, and he leaves in a huff. But when I did an episode of Once Upon a Time, when I played that character, and they turned me into like a wooden staff. So they had this piece of wood that was carved to look like my face, like screaming, and it was pretty cool to see that. I was like, oh wow, you guys, that looks like me. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, do you have any other shows you want to talk about or movies? I know in Brazil, scary movie is very popular. If you want to talk a little bit about it.
About Scary Movie?
Yeah, it's very popular.
So yeah, interesting thing about Scary Movie is, you know, Scary Movie I think was my second or third film gig, and I was pretty terrified doing it. Yeah. You know, I come from a theater background, so I hadn't adjusted to the intimacy of film acting and camera yet. So I think all my stuff was like pretty big, but I think my character was pretty big. But the interesting thing is I shot it and it never made the theatrical cut, but somewhere there's a version of it circulating that I'm in, but I've never seen it.
I want to see that.
Yeah, I've never seen it. So I've always sort of like wanted to check out my scene in Scary Movie,
Probably
but I've never.
To the students.
I mean, I still get money in the mail for it, so so it's out there. So
how was to film this, and even though you were not there,
you know, it was pretty cool. I was a big fan of the Wayans brothers, and they're all there, and like that was really cool. It was right when American Pie was in theaters, so everybody on set was just like staring at Shannon Elizabeth. And I hadn't seen American Pie, so I was staring at Shannon Elizabeth, but just because she's so hot, and not because I had seen American Pie. And then after I wrapped on Scary Movie, I went to go see American Pie in the theater, and I was like, oh my god. And it was probably a good thing that I didn't know, or I would have been staring at Shannon Elizabeth much more.
Taking pictures all over.
Yeah. But it was cool, you know, like Anna Faris nobody knew who she was at the time. It was like her first sort of, it was her like star making movie. Yeah. So she, you know, and when I saw her in the scene, I was like, she's so funny. So, I went up to her sort of after my day was done and said, hey, do you mind if I get a photo with you? And I think that maybe I'm wrong, but like, didn't seem like anybody had been doing that to her at that point, because it was before people really knew who she was. So I was like, it was really cool years later to have this like picture with me and Anna Faris, where I was like, this is so cool. This is like from Scary Movie. Yeah. And yeah, it was just really cool. Like I said, I'd always watched In Living Color, and I love sketch comedy. So to be able to sort of work with the Wayans brothers, and like, that was really awesome. And then you see the movie, it was, and that movie had gone through, so they were just experimenting and trying so many things day to day. They were letting the actors improvise and just doing whatever seemed funny on the day. And like, you don't know with those movies how, if they do that, how they're going to end up. Like, the working title for that movie was Scream If You Know What I Did Last Halloween.
Wow.
And then they, because I think they had released Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood to like parody all those like black culture movies. And then they came out, and then they were going to parody all the horror movies, but then they just changed it to Scary Movie.
Better.
Yeah, and I remember I went to go see it, and I was like, "This is hilarious." So all the stuff that they tried and worked. I mean, those guys are so good, right? So it was so funny. Yeah.
Peter Helen died on it. It's so funny.
Yeah, another teacher that was at the school when you were there. He was he was the guy that jumps off the roof.
I saw that when I was in school. Some of my colleagues, they were like, "Oh, look, that's Peter," and I had no idea. And that's the most famous scene here, at least from me and my friends and almost everybody. I know that scene, the suicidal scene, and I didn't know it was Peter. And I'm like, "Oh my God, my teacher is so famous in Brazil."
Well, that's awesome. I'm currently working on a new Netflix kids show right now. It's called Scaredy Cats. We're halfway through.
All over Netflix, okay? He's on all these shows as well.
Oh, yeah?
You guys about. Okay, tell us about your new project.
Yeah, I'm working on a new kids Netflix show called Scaredy Cats. It should be really, I can't really talk much about it because there's NDAs in place, but there's a non-disclosure agreement. When we work on stuff, we're not allowed to talk about it until the studio releases information, and then we can. But it should be very fun and very cute. And I like doing kids shows a lot. They're really fun. So that should be something to look out for if you have kids or watch kids shows. It'll be on Netflix Kids.
Okay, so you will see that pretty soon.
Yeah, like I said, we're halfway through production, so I don't know if that means it'll be out in a month or 3 months or 6 months, or it's Netflix, so they do it whenever they want it.
It will be there sometime.
Yeah.
And I saw Malibu Rescue, but I saw the movie and I noticed you're in the series.
Yeah, so I did season 1 of Malibu Rescue, and that was a really fun job. Just get up and go to the beach every day, and it was pretty awesome.
Was that in Vancouver?
No, they shot that in LA. So I was in LA for that one. Nice. Yeah, we have our green cards, so we go back and forth a lot. Before sort of COVID came into play, we were going back and forth, but now we're in Canada, and that's where we're going to be.
Talk a little bit about your role on Malibu Rescue.
That was a really cool one. My character's name was Thornton Pavey, and he's the richest guy in Malibu. And
ooh, fancy!
Yeah, so we got to shoot in some pretty cool locations. They rented out this giant mansion and fancy cars for me and a bunch of stuff like that. It was pretty cool to sort of see those things. The best part about that job for me was that originally when they were casting it, they put on the breakdown, which was what they send out to the agents when they're looking for the characters. They put out that they were looking for an Owen Wilson type.
Oh, really?
So that's obviously not what I bring to the table. But when I decided to audition for it and I did my version of it, and they really liked what I did, and so they offered me that role, and that was really cool because, as I said earlier when we were talking, there's over the years, there's not a lot of stuff written for people that look like me, and so now we're seeing this incredible diversive wave, which is amazing for actors, young actors who are coming up now, because they get to sort of their people are being seen for things they would have never been seen for. And so here's this role where they're looking for somebody who looks like Owen Wilson, and that they decide to use me. And it's amazing. It's a real, it's progress in so many ways. I remember when I was teaching at New Image, when you were there, there's another teacher there named, no, I teach at a different school now.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a teacher that worked at New Image called John, whose name is John Emmett Tracy, and he was auditioning for something and came to me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you're going out for this tomorrow, but I read it and I thought of you, so you should see if your agent can get you in if you're not already there." And I was like, "Okay, well, what's the character?" And he said, "Oh, there's a dad and he's got kids." And I was like, I'm going to stop you right there. They will never see me for that role." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "They just won't take the time to look for kids who look like me." And his mind exploded. He was like, I would have never worked. And I was like, yeah, here's another thing. They won't do anything that requires a flashback because they don't want to have to look for younger versions of me. Not only do you have to change their mind when you go in the room and say, because they have an idea of what they want. So not only do you have to then change their mind about what they're wanting for casting, then they have to go through and try and find families that look like you. And so a lot of the times they just sort of keep it white because that's easier. But now sort of as people and families are progressing, and Indian parents are letting their children become actors who want to do it. There's sort of an influx of young Indian actors. And so for me, it was really cool for them to not only give me that role on Malibu Rescue, but then change the breakdown, looking for, a young Indian guy to play my son in the show. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And this would have never happened 10 years ago. So,
It's true.
for actors that are, like for actors that are starting out, it's, and who don't look like Ken and Barbie, it's pretty exciting.
It's true. I feel a little bit related to you, because as a Latina girl, a Brazilian girl, was harder for me because I don't have the Spanish accent. I don't look Spanish. I do look a little American or Russian or whatever they call. European or American or Canadian, the French Canadian. So it was very tough for me to place me in the auditions they would like to see me. They get me for the minority differential roles, but I wasn't cast as what they were looking for if I was cast. So I feel you. But yeah, it's very awesome that you got this part and they changed everything on the script they were trying to.
It was really, really cool. I mean,
so what would you say is the secret? What do you bring on the table that make the casting director say, no, that's the guy I want. Forget about this. Let's go with
honestly, when I did my audition, like I was literally, I said to my reader, like, there's no way I'm ever going to get this. So I didn't put any pressure on myself, and I just had fun with it. And so I think that the idea of sort of not trying to get a job when you send your audition in really goes a long way. Because you're not, at the end of it, you're not sort of you're not saying like, I hope you like this tape and hire me. Like I just put it out there and I was like, this is my version of it. And I hope you like it, but it's not going my way. So I think that idea of just being able to sort of invest yourself in the character and not think about the job, that maybe that was the thing. I mean, I don't know. That's something you'd have to ask to the directors, the executive producers, and
comment here, directors, casting.
Yeah.
No, so what is the mindset for the other ones? Do you always go to have fun, or sometimes you hope more you get a job and then you don't end up getting?
Over the years, what I've learned is that I approach each audition as what's happening in the scene. I try not to think about getting the job, because then I'm like thinking, oh, this would be a cool experience, and I'd get to work with this person and that person, and I'd, make this much money. And so then you're not thinking about the things that the character is thinking about. And so then you're not playing the character. You know what I mean? You're the actor hoping to get a break. So I always try to think about my auditions of what's happening in the scene. So even after I'm done my auditions, and if my agent calls me and says, hey, they're interested in you for this role, I won't remember. I'll be like, what is that? And he'll be like, oh, the movie that you, and I was like, what is it? What was happening in the scene? So I always remember my auditions as the characters and the scenes and not the project. So that's why it's always funny when people go like, oh, what, I have an audition tomorrow. Like, oh, for what? And I was like, some like, the boss of a company. Like, I don't say like, oh, it's a, Fox movie or something, like I think about it in different terms. And that's what works for me, just to keep it sort of on the page of character versus actor.
I think it's definitely worth a try. Let's try that. Why not? Just focus on your scene and forget all about who is directing, who is on the movie, who's going to be there acting.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so many things as actors that we don't have control over. We don't have control over the order that they watch our audition tapes in, or if they watch our audition tapes, or if they watched, the person before you they watched it and said, perfect, that's our guy. You don't have control of whether or not you look like somebody's ex and they watch you and be like, oh, nope, that person's not, you just don't know any of those things. You just have control of the things that you have control over, which is your preparation and that
applies to life too. That applies to our life in general.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so let's go now. Oh, I remembered about Stargate. Tell us a little bit about Stargate.
Stargate was my second gig that I ever did, and
Started with the big ones, like that's it.
So Stargate was fun, man. It was in their I think they ended up going like 9 seasons or something, and it was like season 1, episode 5 or something. So it was really early on in the development of the show, and they were finding their feet, I think, a bit. It was all, the cast was all new and happy to be working together, and it was a really cool role, and sort of a nice foray into the sci-fi world that Vancouver has to offer. There's a lot of sci-fi shows that are shot here and stuff. So,
a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I had already. That was actually it was that one, and then I think Scary Movie was right afterwards.
Oh, I love Scary Movie, like really. It's so fun. Okay.
Yeah, it's on TV and it's still quite funny when it's on. So that's good. Stands the test of time.
True. Eternal movie. Not Scary Movie, Eternal movie. Okay, let's talk about your directing skills now. So you directed one of my plays. Do you want to talk a little bit about the creative process? How did you create my role? How did you choose me to do that big part and everything?
Yeah. So when I was working at that school, a lot of part of the projects that the students had to do were plays. And so instead of going through the process of, there's 5 girls and 4 guys in this class, so I got to find a play that has that number of people in it. What I would do is I would sort of sit down with everybody and I would learn about them and sort of skill sets that they had, things that they brought to the table in terms of personality and passions. And then we would write a play together, and so the students get the opportunity to learn how to create their own work, and then they get to star in something that's essentially a piece of themselves, something that they feel that they have ownership in. And so that's a pretty exciting process. It can get a bit dodgy at times, especially when you have multiple people in a cast and you're trying to make sure everybody gets sort of their moment or some stage time, and you're trying to tie together a narrative and make it make sense. And
we had a lot of people. I think it was 20.
Yeah. So that's a lot. I mean, optimally, when I do these things, I like to have sort of between 6 and 11 people seems to be the magic number, to make sure that everybody gets a piece of the pie. But when you're dealing with 18 to 22 people, that's a really hard deal to like try and make sure everybody gets a slice of their thing. So what we did in that circumstance when we did yours is we made the characters sort of inspired by Disney characters. So there was a group of the princesses, and there was a group of sort of people that were inspired by the Winnie the Pooh characters, and they were all going on this adventure together, which was they were geocaching, which is something that I had learned about in the process of it because one of the students was into geocaching at the time, and that's sort of like so I guess it's like I forget now, so many years ago, but you it's sort of like a treasure hunt that's based on a location on your phone. So all of these characters sort of interweaving and their stories coming out, and there was a bunch of musical numbers. All the Disney princesses sang Spice Girls songs. And I'm so handsome in a golden crown, but all decked up in a brand new gown. Came right down, swept me off the ground. Sing for me, I shall sing. I dropped my shoe in Louvre. She dropped her shoe in Louvre. We don't really need those assholes. They told us we need men. Our relationships were black holes. So me, the lesbian. We don't really need those assholes. So like we needed braille. We're taking on our new roles. This ain't no fairy tale. We don't really need those assholes. We gotta make our own forevers. Greatest man that I will ever meet. What about his weird fetish with your feet? What about his weird fetish with your feet? What about his weird zigga zigga? We don't really need those assholes. It was very fun.
But there was a very serious issue underlying the texts for me and the girls.
Yeah, that's what I try and sort of when I do comedy to try in a sort of thematic have things that are sort of thematically leave you thinking, and whether that talks about sort of social inequity or sort of, bullying or bigger picture issues. So you can approach them in the comedy, but leave people thinking about those things. So, there's with the girls and the Disney princesses, some of them were sort of there was one girl who was obsessed with love and one girl who was obsessed with independence and sort of all of those things that come along that are written into those characters, but also speak volumes about the journeys that human beings go on these days.
But was most of the scenes based on real stories, or only my character in special?
I think a lot. It's hard to sort of not write unless you're writing sketch comedy, and most stuff comes from a root of reality. I find, and whether that just means the beginning of it, if you talk about a bad breakup, and then that's the genesis for something growing into a scene, and then you take sort of information from one thing and then let it sort of grow artistically into something that it becomes. But a lot of those seeds of things are in there. So yeah, I think there's reality in all of those stories where they start or where they end up.
Yeah, for me, it was mind blowing because we changed somebody's life. Remember? It was awesome.
Yeah. That's the thing with those sort of shows like that is you're creating is like they'll continue to change until the very last day. So like unlike traditional shows where you get your script and you can sort of you can memorize it as soon as you get it if you want. Oftentimes those scripts evolve day by day or hour by hour sometimes. So you don't get your final script until opening night.
True.
Yeah.
So are you currently directing in this other school as well, or only teaching?
No, I'm teaching scene study and audition at the other school, and we're going to be developing a program that is the creative program like that. We just haven't done it yet. I've also, with COVID, it's tricky. We're still, the classrooms are big enough where we can do it in person and have people socially distanced, but it can be tricky to sort of have those, ultimately when you're building show building like that, it culminates in people coming to see the show afterwards. And so that's, you can't really do that right now. So I think they've put the brakes on the program over there for this in terms of right now. So that's a bit of a bummer, but it's okay. I've been working on other things, so I'm still busy at least, but it'll come into play.
Of course. And do you have any other shows or movies you want to talk about and a final message for the interview?
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Malibu Rescue and you have kids, the first movie, I would say watch season 1 if you want to catch something in a minute. It's pretty fun. And I did a couple of pretty fun Christmas movies this year. So I don't know if they'll air again next year, but I did one called A Timeless Christmas, and I did another one called Godwink's Christmas, Second Chance, First Love, and they were both pretty cute. So if you guys like Christmas movies, you might be able to find those online and check them out.
Probably they're on Netflix. They have a lot of Christmas movies on Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, those were both Hallmark movies, so they've still been showing them on repeat on those channels. If you guys, I don't know if you have those out there, but just in general.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, yeah, we do. It's usually in the afternoon here in Brazil in the open channels.
Right.
So they're probably gonna see you. Yeah, I love Christmas movies too. I watch all of them in December.
Yeah, they're fun.
Getting ready for Christmas love. No, I'm kidding. So do you have any final insights for people who are getting into acting right now or planning to go to Vancouver, for example, to start acting? Yeah,
I mean, a couple things. I think it's important to sort of hold on to those ideas I know the world's weird right now. Hold on to those, television and movies have gotten us through this really sort of hard and weird time. So hopefully you guys were inspired enough by something to want to do it. And if you take the first steps to start training and make things happen, then you're already doing more than most people ever do in their life. So, if it's something that you feel like you want to do for your life, take the steps to do it. Even if you I have a lot of students who started out taking acting courses and went on to sort of design video games or work on set, like as a technician in some regards. So there's lots of opportunities to make movies, even if you are not acting in them. And that's really cool. There's lots of cool things out there for you to do. Vancouver's a good city to get started in. Casting directors here are awesome and amazing, and they see people against type. And as I mentioned, executive, like producers and directors and networks, they're looking for something different now. And so it's an exciting time, sort of a young actor, to come in and not feel like you have to fit their mold, but to be your own mold. And that's a really sort of new thing in this industry, to be able to just authentically be you and have somebody find value in that, instead of trying to cram yourself into, the idea of what Hollywood has wanted for the last 100 years.
True. New and exciting, because we all have opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
The internet, I think. Internet brought a lot of opportunities to lots and lots of people.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today and telling us about your experiences and giving insights. It was amazing. Nice catching up.
Good. You're very welcome. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Social media.
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm Zahf Paroo, just my first name and last name, Zahf Paroo. Hopefully, Alexandra will.
I'm going to write it here. Yeah.
Put it down there. Same with Facebook. I have an actor page and a personal page. Follow my actor page. I generally only accept friend requests from people I actually know on my personal page, but you can find me on those things. I'm not particularly active on Twitter, but I do have a Twitter account, so follow along there too if you want, and every now and then I'll post a gem.
Cool.
But thanks, and hope to see you guys following along.
Yes, follow him, guys. Bye-bye. Take care.
Put the money back in. As soon as they figure out how to repeat the results you got, the FDA rejected the protocol. Only one person survived.
What? I was the only one? Well, how long will it take to start the trial back up?
A year, maybe 2.
What if Sadie doesn't last that long?
Well, that's the best I can do.